Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cast, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about The Owl House. Around this time last year, I reviewed the first season of the hit Disney show that everybody was talking about, The Owl House. As a result, ever since season 2 began, you guys have been wanting to hear what I think of the most recent season. Well, little did you know that I did that video on season 1 with the full intention of The Owl House becoming the next show I would do episodic reviews on once I finished covering DuckTales. Which took a lot longer than it was supposed to due to life stuff. Sorry about that. But that was then, and this is now. As an aside, I have been giving my first impressions on every episode of season 2 of The Owl House, including episodes that likely will not get full reviews, over on my Patreon. So if you want to hear my thoughts on every episode this season, please consider becoming a patron. Please. We're so close to hitting our first stretch goal. Anyway, here we are. The second season that we waited a very long time for. Expectations and anticipation were high. And given that we're almost through this season at the time of recording this already, so far, it's really lived up to the hype. So which episode could I possibly choose to cover first? There's the obvious choice of the very first episode, or the one where we meet Ida's mother, or one of the many, many episodes that puts Lumity front and center in the most precious and middle finger waving ways possible. But for this video, we're gonna talk about Echoes of the Past. A lot of exciting stuff had been announced for this season, but when I heard they were making this episode, it was easily the one I was anticipating the most. When I reviewed season 1, I made some comments about how much the mystery behind King's origins fascinated me. Where he came from and how he wound up the way he did really piqued my curiosity. Little did I know at the time that I'd get a lot of the answers I was seeking literally 3 episodes into the new season. So let's dive right into Echoes of the Past. When Lilith questions King's claims that he was indeed the king of demons, he insists they venture out to his former kingdom to prove to them that what he's saying is true. While they head out to find answers and humor the little fuzzball, they uncover many secrets and deal with what it means to learn the truth about where King came from. Before we get into the meat of this episode, let's talk a bit about the opening scene, with Luz and Lilith studying glyph combinations. It's a very casual opening, but it does a lot at once and does it really well. Since glyphs are the main source of magic in the Owl House now, a lot of time is spent discovering new things about them, taking the glyphs they discovered and combining them to create more intricate spells, such as what they discover in the opening, invisibility. It's an expansion on how magic works in this universe that will lead to a lot of cool combinations in future adventures. If this show came out when I was a kid, I would have been making a thorough guide to those combos, I assure you. The glyphs not only expand on the world, but the characters. In particular, Lilith's educational curiosity and desire to achieve the highest possible standard. Now that she's no longer in league with the Emperor, we get to see more of Lilith that was hidden behind that veil of unquestioning loyalty to the Emperor's coven. Now, Lilith questions everything. It's a side of her we've never seen before, but will become a prominent trait of her character as the season progresses, which is kind of wonderful to watch. As is her unexpected friendship with Hooty, which grows close pretty quickly and was, for me at least, surprisingly endearing during Lilith's time in the Owl House. We know that Ida and Lilith didn't really have any friends growing up besides each other, and we know Hooty doesn't have any close friends because he's Hooty. So the fact that they develop this friendship that is so genuine, despite how much they should contrast with each other personality-wise, makes it pretty fun and adorable to watch their interactions. 2 words I never thought I would use to describe Lilith or Hooty. I'm done for, Lulu!
Hootsufer, this is make-believe.
This is the fun that can be had with reforming a character. Changing their way of life can also mean changing how they live those lives. Some change a lot and some change very little. Playing with what would change and what wouldn't is part of the excitement for character arcs like this to me. What has changed with Lilith is her ability to admit that she's not perfect while seeking to understand things she thought she knew everything about. What hasn't changed about Lilith is how condescending she can be when she does things she knows exactly what she's talking about, which is what happens when she questions King's story about his origins. So the group are off on a quest where King can prove his stories are true. Luce, King, Lilith, and yes, even Hooty. How is this possible? Well, apparently Hooty can convert himself into this portable backpack, the Porta-Hooty. Patent pending. Now, when I first saw this, thing in the promos, I thought this was something they'd invent on the spot so Hootie could accompany them. But nope, apparently Hootie could always do this. That's when I realized that he had this bag lying around and never used it because no one ever asked him to go with them anywhere until Lilith. Makes a lot of those times the gang ditched him in season 1 sad instead of funny now. But this is still Hootie, so it's still kinda disturbing. I think Lou summed it up pretty well. While the episode opens with some fun character progression and interactions, where it gets really interesting is when King takes them to where he comes from, this strange, far-off deserted island, with a high mountain on one side almost acting like a fortress, cloaking some kind of long-lost structure now in ruins, covered in markings and carvings that predate any history Lilith is aware of. This is where things get good, at least for me. Like I said, I've been very curious about where King came from for a very long time. Now our heroes are standing in the middle of King's history, seeking to decipher it since no one truly believes what King says, not even Luz. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Exploring this mysterious cavern of wonders is a real treat, from an artistic and narrative standpoint. It's very spooky, as it appears to have been abandoned for some time. There are tall towers with many corridors, implying that there were several people living here at one point, and there are carvings all over the place depicting the history of this place, albeit cryptically and vaguely. The background and layout artists really outdid themselves here, making a dark and dingy environment flourish with detail. But many of these markings have some resemblance to King and his stories, which funnily enough convinces Lilith and Hootie for a hot minute that what King says might actually be true. Meanwhile, Lou stumbles across a hallway filled with some kind of sentries or soldiers. They have these really unique and creepy designs that are also kind of cute. Is that last one just me? I really liked them. Creepy and cute is a combination the Owl House frequently pulls off, as the star of this episode proves. One of them wakes up and quickly proves to be a forceful obstacle. Luckily, Ida followed them and not only immediately recognized this thing, but knows its weaknesses. Mainly that it can't leave the castle. For some reason. Before we can explore the implications of that extra bit of lore, we need to talk about something much more important. The true story behind where King came from. Now that it's put her family's lives in danger, Ida realizes that she can't keep the truth from King anymore. My working theory about where King came from was that he was banished from the land he comes from for being different. By that I mean cute and fluffy. Maybe even being stripped of some magic powers as a punishment. Like Luz and Ida, he was different and ostracized for it. King isn't the only demon on the show to be on the more small and pathetic side, so combined with King's story, I figured there had been some larger conspiracy by Emperor Bellows causing this as another way to take away magic from the Boiling Isles. And like Lilith, I was fooled into thinking that the carvings in this place were supporting that theory, and that's where the episode was going. Well, that wasn't quite right. We learned that a few years back, Ida stumbled across this island while on the run and discovered a strange little creature she thought was being hunted by that same guard that threatened them now. And before going any further, another shout out to the art department, specifically regarding the character designs. I love this version of a younger Ida, and I absolutely cannot get over. Guys, this is too much for me. Like, King is cute as he is, but little baby King is just too pure for this world. Nothing should be that cute. It should be illegal. This little furball dominated my Tumblr for at least a week or two after this episode came out. It was a problem. There's also an interesting reveal about King's design here. When Ida got in a fight with that guard, it hurt King, which is what caused his horn to break. This will become significant later, as making contact with the severed piece will help King recall his early memories. Again, it's another detail that shows how well thought out character design can really enhance the story. I never thought twice about King's broken horn, so I was floored to see it become such a vital piece of King's story. Obviously though, the most important part of this flashback is the revelations surrounding King. As it turns out, Ida found him as a young cub, spawn, whatever. And when they were attacked, Ida took him home as a pet. Once she realized he could communicate and maybe a little lonely, she tells him stories about how the way he acts reminds her of a king, telling stories of the great acts and feats of powerful rulers. Thus, in King's young and impressionable mind, he got the idea that he actually was all of these things. There was a lot that fascinated me about the story, apart from everything. But one part I really enjoyed was how it adds more context to well-known character traits. I'd say this was probably the first time Ida's more maternal side kicked in. The lone outlaw taking in another living thing, even if she thought he was just going to be a pet, feels like the beginning of an instinct that carries on with her to this day. And King's propensity to build armies isn't just a character quirk with the stuffed animals, it seems to be almost instinctual for him. When Ida finds him, he's building an army out of rocks and does so again with junk lying around her house. Watching Ida tell King stories about tales of strong kings is really sweet, as is when Little King seems to be absolutely enraptured by the stories to the point that his eyes take up his entire head. Oh my god, guys, I can't. Look at his little face. I was equally as invested in the story, to the point that I almost forgot that this is going to be absolutely devastating for King in the present. Everything he believed, everything he thought he was, and maybe even could become again, was a lie. A story to lift his spirits that neither Ida nor Luce ever had the heart to correct him on. But eventually, the truth is going to come out, and the one being deceived is going to have to deal with that someday. Learning the truth sends King's world crashing down. It's a much more devastating and emotional moment than I ever expected from King, despite the fact he's one of my favorite characters. I think it's reasonable to say that King is a very insecure character. He boasts and talks a big game, but that's mostly to cover for the fact that he's not intimidating or powerful in any way. So this belief that he used to be and is destined to be again a powerful creature that ruled over and was feared by his many subjects was more important to him than I think anyone expected. Ida and Luce knew it made him happy, which is why they kept it up. It's a nice sentiment and one that on some level I understand, but like most well-meaning deception, I don't think they took into account how much King would come to rely on that lie and what having it taken away would mean to him. It's possible that King was so easily convinced that this was true because he had nothing before Ida came along and offered him something else. He didn't have a history, so he made one where he was everything he wanted to be. But the important difference between when King was found and now is that he has a loving family. A family who will be there for him no matter what. As King is having an existential crisis on the beach, Luce assures him that this doesn't change how much she cares about him. Yes, it's that very affection that led to this deception in the first place, but what's really important is that King knows that that story has no impact on how much his new family cares about him. Whether he's a former king of demons or just a temperamental widow fella, they'll be there for him as his family. An incredibly important and heartfelt assurance, and easily the emotional high point of the episode. Now that King knows his family isn't going anywhere, he's ready to face the reality of what his past really is. And because everyone is finally ready to be honest with each other, they can work together and discover the truth. Without needing to keep up with the story, they can piece the few clues they have together better. Like, why was King here in the first place? And why are there carvings here that do kind of resemble him? At the top of the tower, at the center of the island, there's a chamber that seems to be where King was born, which doesn't appear to be that long ago. So King acts childish, not just because he's cute and it's funny, but because he actually is a kid. A kid who was left alone by the time he was hatched. Being in this place, King is able to recall vague memories that imply that someone, presumably his father, was protecting him from something and vanished, leaving King alone. What really happened is tough to say because King was too young to understand what was happening, but I wouldn't be surprised if it still somehow involved Bellows. I'm not sure how, but come on. Whatever circumstances led to King being left behind by his family, they seem to do the best they could to look after him. He's the only one able to open any doors around here, and that creature that's been attacking the group this whole time, it was there to watch over and protect King. From what? Beats me. But it's a detail that shows that I don't think King was willingly abandoned. It seems like whoever left him behind wanted to make sure he was safe and taken care of to the best of their ability. They just didn't count on a renegade witch adopting him. Well, no parents are perfect. Like some of the best ongoing mysteries, it's a sequence of events that certainly answers a lot of questions, but raises many more. In a way that can feel satisfying to leave old assumptions behind and work on asking new questions. Which is what King sets out to do, to find his dad and learn more about where he comes from, carving a symbol from the ruins into his collar, and even taking that guard back home with him. You know, I'm kind of surprised that as of right now, they haven't figured out how to reanimate that thing outside of the castle yet. Yeah, there are still questions to answer, but on a character level, it feels so nice to watch King get a better idea of who he really is, rather than relying on something to try and make himself look better. A great visual for this transformation being when he glues his horn back on, which would be the first of many character design transformations to come in season 2, ending this adventure on a warm, satisfying, but still intriguing note. Overall, Echoes of the Past is the perfect example of the kind of story I was hoping they'd tell in season 2, taking the intriguing possibilities of the first season and with the added time and extra episodes, going more in depth into the world and characters. It really says something about how good a story is when I had a decent theory for where I wanted to go, the episodes seem to be headed in that direction, and then it winds up somewhere completely different, and I am not disappointed in the slightest. The Owl House is the kind of show where they have histories like this all worked out before we'd even think about asking about them. The characters are so fleshed out that even the little comic relief sidekick can have a tragic and compelling origin that shines a new light on a lot of his past behavior. The story and mystery are highly engaging, the animation and production art are very atmospheric and detailed, the theme of the rewards that can be gained by being honest with yourself and with others, especially when it's hard, is a well-meaning and well-realized one, and I've got to give major props to the voice acting in this episode. I don't think we give Alex Hirsch enough credit as a voice actor. His range is not only varied, even though you can usually tell it's him, but his performance here really punctuates just how sad and lost King feels during these revelations. It's so sincere in a way that tugs at your heartstrings relentlessly, and that's all thanks to Hirsch. Now that we have a better idea of what King's background actually is, I would spend some time speculating over what King's origins are and what happened to his family, but as I'm recording this, the upcoming episode sounds like it'll be doing just that, and any points I could raise will likely be moot by the time this video actually goes up. So I'll just say that this episode was a great starting point for what will likely become a much greater journey for everyone's favorite little cutie pie, formerly known as the King of Demons. Whatever he turns out to be, I'll still love him. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including David L. Sproul, Sebastian Canino of Cinemageddon Reviews, Chelsea Crandall, Hawk Hero, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks and helping us reach our very first stretch goal, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.